Hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation focused on the Solid Edge Technical Publication Solution from Siemens Digital Industry Software. My name is Kevin Grayson, and I'll be your presenter for today. Before we get started, I'd like to share a personal anecdote related to a situation I recently experienced that highlighted the significance of having clear and correct technical documentation. As you can probably tell by the image shown, one of the benefits of a Jeep is its configurability. You can ride fully enclosed, like most vehicles, with the doors and top on, fully open, as shown, or even somewhere in between. Popping the driver and passenger roof panels off is pretty simple, and the same can be said for removing the doors. For Jeeps with a hard top, however, removing the main portion of the top that covers the back of the Jeep and then finding a place to store it is probably the most difficult part. It's neither easy nor convenient, and in most cases, it requires at least two people to accomplish this task. To make this process less tedious and less time-consuming, I found this really great product that allowed me to essentially remove the hardtop in less than 2 minutes and then easily store it in my garage, all by myself. If you live in an area like me, where the weather can change daily, this is a great product to have flexibility in how you want to ride. As many of you may have experienced with other products you've purchased, often you have a choice on the type of documentation you want to utilize in putting products together that require assembly. Today, you often have the physical, in-the-box hard copy documentation, or you can often go online, usually on a mobile device, and utilize the digital version of the instructions. Those digital instructions can be either a copy of the physical manual, or you might even have video instructions from the company's website or even YouTube. And what I found was in this instance, I had access to all three. Unfortunately, each one was subtly different. If you look closely between the first two images shown, you can see that a design change was made in how the user adjusts the mechanism. It just so happened the version of the instructions I initially chose to follow were out of date, causing quite a bit of frustration during portions of the assembly process. What happened in my situation is quite common. Oftentimes companies, in order to speed time to market, start the process of creating technical documentation earlier so that it will be ready when the product is ready. But changes made during late-stage design or change requests made during manufacturing can often result in differences between the product and its documentation. For today's presentation, we want to start with some of the challenges that many companies face in creating technical publications. From there, we will briefly cover the digitalization portfolio that we offer with Solid Edge. We'll then take a deeper look with a demonstration of Solid Edge technical publications and how it interacts with Solid Edge CAD data. Finally, we'll cover the potential ROI of the solution, followed by a sample customer case study, and then wrap up with a Q&A session. From a Siemens digital industry software perspective, our customers are harnessing the power of digital technologies and the digital twin to transform their businesses. The digital twin means to design and test your products in a virtual world on the screen and correct your mistakes there long before you begin the manufacturing process. The value of the digital twin lies in how closely the virtual meets the physical world. And in today's competitive market, let's understand that a true digital twin is not an option, it's a necessity. Manufacturers are recognizing that clear, accurate images of parts and products are the foundation of high-quality downstream documentation. The challenge is it needs to be extremely high quality, but also done quickly. Unfortunately, quality and speed are often competing, sometimes to the detriment of a company's reputation and bottom line. And documentation is not relegated to just the design process. It's also necessary for manufacturing, installation, and maintenance procedures. In addition, the need for proper documentation for sales and marketing or in customer use is also critical and essential, not just for the performance of the products, but also for the overall success of the business. The good news is for most parts and assemblies, 3D digital models are created as part of the product development process in the form of computer-aided design or CAD files. Unfortunately, converting those 3D CAD files into technical documentation can be a painstaking process that takes time and expertise. The task of converting files and managing additional files for documentation purposes usually falls on the busy designer. Sometimes, instead of converting the files, the designer provides bitmap screen captures of CAD images with a specific orientation to be used as is or recreated by illustrators. All these projects take designers away from their day-to-day work. To save precious engineering time and as an alternative to converting CAD files, some manufacturers are still taking photographs of a physical prototype to create graphical content. Of course, this means the prototype must be manufactured first. While 3D models are an accurate source of product information, creating documentation is often one of the last steps in the product development lifecycle because of the need to ensure documents accurately reflect the final design of the product. But since the process of creating documentation can be so time-consuming, ship dates can be held up by documentation. Ready-to-ship products sitting on the shelf because they are waiting on required documentation frustrates the design team as well as customers. Getting to market quickly can mean the difference between a competitive edge and lost revenue. And meeting customer milestones for product delivery can mean the difference between a profit and contractual fees. The goal, however, is to have the ability to build publications and other documentation in tandem with design. And not only to build in tandem, but also to keep them associatively linked. This offers manufacturers several advantages. Illustrators have more time to detail their work. In addition, they don't need to worry about a design change down the road and validating everything they're currently doing. Solid Edge is a key part of the Siemens Accelerator portfolio and is focused on the requirements of small and medium-sized manufacturers. Solid Edge enables manufacturers to create a comprehensive digital twin of their products and includes solutions for mechanical design, electrical design, simulation, manufacturing, and as we're discussing today, technical publications. It also facilitates collaboration both within manufacturing companies and with external resources, including suppliers and customers. Solid Edge is the on-ramp to digital transformation. Solid Edge Technical Publications offers a wide array of various capabilities, from single-page illustrations to entire sets of documents including interactive 3D views, text-based instructions, and Excel-style charts. Solid Edge Technical Publications allows customers to deliver customized documents, all while providing users options and flexibility on how they wish to work. In terms of workflows, Solid Edge Technical Publications is very flexible in how content is both created and accessed. Both Solid Edge users as well as non-CAD illustrators have the ability to easily create documentation. For the situation where the CAD designer is also the one creating the documentation, Solid Edge Technical Publications can be launched right from within the CAD interface. For non-CAD illustrators, Solid Edge Technical Publications can be launched outside of the CAD environment. If access to CAD data is available, illustrators can insert it on the fly. If CAD data access isn't available, illustrators can still create documentation by opening a unique file that can be generated right from the CAD data. Over the next few minutes, we're going to show the many advantages of Solid Edge Technical Publications. We'll start by showing the seamless flow of information from the CAD design right into Solid Edge Technical Publications. From there, we'll show the flexibility in taking that data and creating different types of documentation. We'll also demonstrate how changes made to the CAD data during late-stage design or change requests made during manufacturing are automatically updated and reflected in the documentation. Finally, we'll show the end result of the final published documentation and the interaction the end user has in consuming the information in easy-to-read interactive formats. One of the main benefits of a documentation tool like Solid Edge Technical Publications is the visual display and interaction with the product within the documentation itself. This makes the information much easier to consume and understand. Because Solid Edge Technical Publications automatically pulls features from the CAD information, engineers don't have to convert files, and illustrators don't have to manually recreate that data, which can include metadata, exploded views, assembly configurations, and more. This design information all flows seamlessly from Solid Edge to the Technical Publications tool. Let's take a look at this sewing and embroidery machine designed in Solid Edge. Within the Solid Edge design application, saved views or display configurations makes it easy for the designer to access what they need instantaneously without having to navigate through the component pathfinder. For example, if the designer wants to focus on the main frame and turn off the outer plastic components, they can do this quickly by selecting it from a shortcut. Or maybe the designer needs to look at the motor for a specific task. More specifically, the designer can see the motor in its exploded state to see hidden parts or verify the order of assembly. And while these tools are important to the designer, they're also just as important to the person creating the documentation. We mentioned earlier that the task of converting files and managing additional files that must be created for documentation purposes usually falls on the busy designer who created the original CAD files. Solid Edge Technical Publications can be launched right from within the CAD interface. You'll notice all the display configurations we just looked at in the Design tool are available to access. In the case of the motor, you can see both the assembled and exploded states. Because Solid Edge Technical Publications is template-based, it is very easy to access predefined views or pages that contain the structure of what needs to be consumed. To make it easier for the consumer to see the composition of the motor, the illustrator may want to have a list of components as well as an easy way to quickly show the motor in both its assembled and exploded views. To do this, the illustrator can quickly capture an illustration of the current assembled motor. This illustration can then be easily copied and then pointed to the exploded view display configuration. To enhance the connection between the 3D design and the list of components, a callout or balloon can also be quickly added. The balloon can call out standard item numbers that reference the parts list or bill of materials, or it can automatically extract out other relevant properties of the components, such as part numbers, materials, descriptions, or any other property you might typically see on a standard design drawing. Another benefit is the cross-highlighting between the list of components and the 3D design that allows the consumer of the documentation to cross-reference the 3D model to its associated document number or any other property that was brought over from Solid Edge. So we just saw how technical publications streamlines the flow of information into the technical publications tool from the CAD tool. But let's run through a scenario where the documentation calls for instructions on how to repair or replace the motor. And let's assume the illustrator is not a Solid Edge CAD savvy person or that the information doesn't already exist. In this example, we want to show how easy it is for non-CAD personnel to utilize the CAD data but have the flexibility to create documentation on the fly within the technical publications tool itself and not have to rely on a CAD designer to create the appropriate display configuration or views they need to convey critical details. To start, the illustrator will specify they want to create a new custom view, and in this case, they'll call it disassembly. Like in the CAD application, they can manipulate the views of the 3D design with specific zooms, pans, or rotations, or as an alternative, select pre-configured common views. To get to the motor, certain parts have to be moved or disassembled in order to gain access. Here you can see by simply selecting the cover, it can be moved out of the way to replicate the real-world first step of getting to the motor. Each time a part is selected to be moved, that process step is captured on the left-hand side of the screen in the exploded view tree. This process will be repeated a few more times for other parts until the operator finally gets to the motor. Each of the 7 steps in the disassembly process are captured, and now a new storyboard, basically individual illustrations for each step, can be automated through a storyboard wizard. Now that the storyboard has been created, the process can be simulated with on-screen navigation buttons built into the supplied template. In addition to having the process simulation with the 3D models, we may also want to include on-screen text instructions for even more clarity on what the operator needs to do for each step in the process. All the details for each step can be captured with specific instructions which auto-populates into the documentation. To revisit the benefit of reusing design information brought over from CAD, now we'll show how part properties, such as part descriptions or document numbers, can be easily retrieved and displayed as the operator navigates through the different steps. Notice how the first step of removing the cover is going to show the highlighted cover's unique document number. As the process is simulated through the next steps, the document number automatically changes to reflect the appropriate highlighted part. Because you have to ensure documents accurately reflect the final design of the product, creating documentation has traditionally been one of the last steps in the product development lifecycle. However, with Solid Edge technical publications, the ability to not only reference, but keep associative the 3D design in the documentation means late-stage design changes are not such a big deal. In this example, a sheet metal bracket found within the motor assembly has been found to be insufficient for proper operation of the sewing and embroidery machine. Through the Solid Edge simulation application, it's been analyzed that by adding a couple of additional bends, the bracket will have the added stiffness needed to operate properly. The design change can be made on the fly in the context of this assembly, or as we'll show here, we'll presume the modification to the sheet metal bracket was already made and we'll use a replace part option to insert the new design in place of the outdated one. After the change has been made in Solid Edge, the illustrator simply goes back to the documentation and hits Update. This ability to build illustrations and other documentation in tandem with design versus after the fact and keep it associative offers manufacturers several advantages. Illustrators have more time to detail their work, and they don't need to worry about a design change down the road in validating everything they're currently doing. This not only ensures that the documentation is correct and up to date, but it allows companies to get their products out the door and faster and gain a competitive edge. Solid Edge Technical Publications gives companies and customers another edge. You can build out and offer interactive, visual-rich web content and documents that users can easily manipulate and interrogate. Companies are no longer limited to delivering static documents like the user manuals of old. The difference between reading about the steps needed to carry out a procedure and seeing those steps depicted in a graphical representation or animation makes a world of difference for manufacturing, service professionals, and consumers. When technical documentation is accessible in the format and on the device that users need, it can be easily accessed to clarify instructions and procedures, helping to avoid mistakes. In addition to using the 3D design to create the documentation, there's also the ability to utilize or reference other documents as links within the current documentation. For example, the image seen here is a link to a video which shows maintenance instructions on how to clean the sewing machine once the motor has been repaired or replaced. This will be shown momentarily, but first let's discuss some of the options on publishing the documentation. Once all the documentation has been created, the illustrator has the ability to publish it so that those on the shop floor or in the field, or even the end customer, can easily access it in a common, easy-to-use format. Obviously, there are print settings for those who may wish to have a hard copy format, but there are more popular digital formats such as PDF and HTML5 that can be consumed on a PC, tablet, or phone. If we go to the HTML version of the published motor replacement documentation, you can see how interactive the documentation really is. Like in the tool itself, simply clicking on a button interactively changes the view, and as we navigate to other pages within the document, the consumer can click the next button to walk through the step-by-step process of the instructions. In fact, the 3D design within the documentation can be zoomed, panned, or rotated for additional clarity if the consumer needs to look closer or get a perspective not offered within the documentation. The exploded and assembled views of the motor can also be toggled at will, and as was mentioned before, outside links to videos or other files can also be accessed right from within the published documentation. Before taking a look at ROI, let's first review all the benefits of using Solid Edge technical publication software from a product development perspective, as well as the downstream benefits customers will experience. First, let's look at less time. Less time for designers to answer questions from other departments and manufacturing engineers creating the documentation. Next, reduced errors, because the documentation is associatively linked to the CAD design. Interactivity. Consumers have more clarity because the documentation is dynamic and not just static text and images. And let's not forget the downstream benefits with overall customer satisfaction with products being delivered on time. Products are also installed, commissioned, and maintained more correctly and efficiently, resulting in lower operating costs. Let's take a closer look at the return on investment. Let's use an example where we assume an average of about 6 hours per week spent by engineers creating technical documentation, often with the traditional methods of copying and pasting from the CAD application into a Word document, or maybe even manually taking photographs and uploading those to their PC before inserting those photos into the documentation. Let's also just assume that there's roughly a $60 per hour overall or loaded cost to the business when you consider employee benefits and other indirect costs. For the example here of 4 engineers, if we can automate the documentation process using Solid Edge technical publications, you can typically save about 80% of the documentation time. That equates to a savings of about 19 hours per week, and for a team of 4 engineers, that's going to generate a huge cost savings of roughly $55,000 per year. Even if you reduce this down to 1 engineer, the efficiency gained by using Solid Edge technical publications allows for the software to pay for itself in the course of the year. Solaris is a global company that manufactures coding equipment in locations such as Belgium and the United States. Previously, they used Microsoft Office software, but they had poor, inconsistent documents, which made it difficult for their customers to find spare parts. Among various types of documentation, Solid Edge Technical Publications allows them to create interactive spare parts catalogs. They're able to eliminate the need to print and mail documents, which saves them thousands of dollars every year. And it becomes easier for customers to find those spare parts, which means increased sales. Reduced costs and increased sales all adds up to increased profits. So this brings us to the conclusion of today's presentation. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. We will go ahead and open it up for a Q&A session at this point. Thank you very much.